This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Prime Minister Sifir Rayib has chaired the opening ceremony of the first edition of the 2025 World Skills Competition held in the western city of Oran. And Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf has affirmed that during negotiations on the UN Security Council draft resolution concerning the Gaza peace plan, Algeria managed to introduce a very important amendment aimed at enabling the Palestinian people to establish their independent and sovereign state. UNICEF has warned that the situation of children impacted by severe weather conditions and floods in Gaza may worsen, with more heavy rains expected in the coming days. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. I'm Asya Bakar. Good afternoon. Entrusted by President Abdelmajid Tebboune, Prime Minister Sifir Rayib has chaired the opening ceremony of the first edition of the 2025 World Skills Competition held in the city of Oran. Mohammed Khatil reports.
The 2025 World Skills Competition brings together 550 participants from the vocational training and education sector from various provinces of the country. The opening ceremony of this professional event, held under the high patronage of the President of the Republic, was attended by several national high-ranking officials, notably the Minister of Vocational Training and Education, Nassima Arhab. The Algerian Premier has praised the participating youngsters, honoring Algeria.
Today, you, the pioneers of the first generation of Algerians who raised the banner of skill and mastery under the umbrella of the global initiative World Skills, each of you has the responsibility to represent Algeria in this forum. Every competition which you participate is a message to the world that Algeria has talented individuals capable of excelling, innovating, and competing. Algeria is investing in its youth and believes in their enormous potential. Its main objective is for all graduates of vocational training to be able to compete in the labor market and become entrepreneurs and creatives capable of generating added value, not just job seekers.
The ceremony was also attended by the Libyan Minister of Technical and Vocational Education, Ikhlaf Saeed Isyafu, and the Nigerian Minister of State for Education, Suwaiba Saeed Ahmed. The event will be marked by the organization of sub-events in the fields of construction and public works technologies, information and communication technologies, services, creative arts and fashion, transportation and logistics. The jury is composed of teachers, professionals from the vocational training and education sector, representatives from the business world, and specialized experts tasked with evaluating the work completed by the young trainees. The winners will represent Algeria at the Continental Olympiad in Zambia and the World Skills Competition in Shanghai next year. The event is expected to attract nearly 60,000 visitors with the mobilization of 300 volunteers and several technical and administrative committees.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and the Minister of State in charge of Foreign Affairs, National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, has affirmed that during negotiations on the UN Security Council draft resolution concerning the Gaza peace plan, Algeria managed to introduce a very important amendment aimed at enabling the Palestinian people to establish their independent and sovereign state. Mohammed Khatil again.
During a press conference held at the ministry headquarters, Mr. Attaf emphasized that Algeria succeeded during the negotiations to introduce an amendment clarifying that the ultimate purpose of the resolution is to create the conditions to pave the way for a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and enable the Palestinian people to establish their independent and sovereign state. The Minister of State pointed out that the adopted resolution does not in any way whatsoever affect the foundations of a just, lasting and final solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as agreed upon by the international community and in accordance with relevant international resolutions. The adopted resolution, Mr. Attaf went on to say, also highlights all previous Security Council resolutions related to the Palestinian question, which constitute the international basis for enabling the Palestinian people to establish their independent and sovereign state, adding that the Palestinian people have legitimate and rightful rights through ending the occupation of their lands and achieving their national project.
And now the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged all the parties to turn to the ceasefire in the Middle East into a lasting plan. In New York, in his video message to the 6th session of the conference on the establishment of a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, Mr. Guterres said that it was high time to turn momentum into concrete action, adding that after 2 years of catastrophic war in Gaza, there is finally a path forward.
The people of the Middle East deserve stability and peace. But the threat of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction is pushing this promise further out of reach. A zone free of these scourges would help ease tensions and prevent the worst-case scenario from ever coming to pass. Now you must turn momentum into concrete action. After 2 years of catastrophic war in Gaza, there is finally a path forward. I urge all parties to honor their commitments, consolidate the ceasefire, and transform it into lasting peace. I call on all states in the region to make it a zone free of all weapons of mass destruction. And I urge the international community to render its full support.
That was the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar Benjama, has affirmed that a genuine peace in the Middle East cannot be achieved without justice for the Palestinian people. Addressing a meeting of the UN Security Council, he affirmed that justice was essential for the Palestinian people who have waited for decades for the setting up of their independent state. He also affirmed that Algeria would stand ready to assume its responsibility and contribute to the efforts to rebuild civilian infrastructure in Gaza to the benefit of the Palestinian people.
Today, Gaza lies in ruins, and its population bears the deep scars inflicted by a devastating war machine. The time has come. The time has come for the reconstruction of Gaza with the support of the international community, the international financial institution, including the World Bank. Algeria, for its part, will stand ready to assume its responsibility and will contribute to the effort to rebuild civilian infrastructure in Gaza, solely for the benefit of the Palestinian people.
Algeria's representative also assured that Algeria had finally decided to vote in favor of the draft resolution allowing for the implementation of the second stage of the peace plan for Gaza as it supports the document's objective.
If Algeria has made it a solemn duty to stand consistently with Palestine, we have also pledged never to overstep this role, and above all, without engaging in any form of overstatement or one-upmanship, but rather to fully respect the choices and the decisions of the Palestinian people themselves and their representatives. Algeria has finally decided to vote in favor of this text, a text that we support its core objective, namely the maintenance of the ceasefire.
He also referred to the details of the draft resolution paving the way for a transitional governing body in Gaza.
Gaza will be administered under a transitional arrangement by a technocratic Palestinian committee pending the return of the Palestinian Authority to assume its full responsibilities in the Strip as outlined in the comprehensive plan. The establishment of an international stabilization force is a major development. We believe it will, as mandated, first and foremost, provide protection to Palestinian civilians and enable the complete withdrawal of Israeli occupying forces from Gaza.
That was Algeria's representative to the UN, Ammar bin Jama. Now, aid agencies have reiterated calls for the Israeli occupation to allow more tents and urgently needed supplies into Gaza after the first heavy winter rainfall, saying more than 250,000 families need emergency help with shelters. Speaking of the situation of children impacted by severe weather conditions and flood in Gaza, the UNICEF communication manager Ricardo Perez said that more heavy rains are expected for the coming days, which may worsen the already dire humanitarian situation.
The situation of children and families in Gaza remains catastrophic, extremely dire, with the temperatures changing and the weather creating a lot of difficulties to an already exhausted population. Severe rain and floodings have deepened the suffering of children and families in Gaza, particularly for internally displaced families living in makeshift shelters. An estimated 17,000 families have been affected over the last 3 or 4 days. When children are sleeping in flooded tents without warm clothing or dry bedding, many lacking the required nutrition, with very low immunity and already traumatized by conflict, winter becomes extremely dangerous. It can lead to hypothermia, respiratory infections, and preventable deaths. And the weather is expected again to worsen, and impact will be very, very similar, if not worse, to what we're seeing right now in Gaza.
That was the UNICEF communication manager. Now, Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar bin Jama, has affirmed in New York that breaking the vicious cycle between hunger and conflict is essential to preserving international peace and security, reaffirming Algeria's commitment to working with all parties to protect civilians, uphold international humanitarian law, and support lasting and just peace in the world. Ms. Hochshofi reports.
Addressing a high-level open debate on conflict-induced food insecurity titled Farming Global Dialogue Addressing Food Insecurity as a Driver of Conflict and Ensuring Food Security for Sustainable Peace, Mr. bin Jama said that despite the adoption by the UN Security Council of Resolution 2417, food insecurity is rising, with conflict driving severe crises in Sudan and Gaza.
Although the Security Council adopted Resolution 2417 in 2018, resolution which identifies the link between armed conflict and hunger, resolution which condemns the use of starvation as a method of warfare. Acute food insecurity continues to escalate. The 2025 Global Report on Food Crisis demonstrates that conflicts remains the primary drivers of the most severe crisis. Nowhere is this starker than in Sudan, than in Gaza.
Mr. bin Jama noted that starvation in Gaza is used as a weapon, urging for action to be taken to break the hunger conflict cycle.
In Gaza, siege tactics, restrictions on food, clean water, fuel and electricity, and repeated strikes on essential infrastructures have amounted to the use of starvation as a weapon of war. The impact on civilians, especially children, has been profound, with long-term consequences that cannot be reversed. The link between hunger and conflict feeds a vicious circle, a vicious cycle. Breaking this cycle is essential if the Council is to uphold its responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security.
In this connection, Mr. bin Jama stressed that starvation is unjustified. Civilians and essential systems must be protected, and highlighted Algeria's role and commitment via the September 2025 declaration.
Starvation can never be justified as a tool of war. Parties to conflict must protect civilians and the system crucial to their survival. including food production and water infrastructure, and must allow unimpeded humanitarian access to the needy population. Algeria is actively engaged in this agenda, co-chairing the working group on the protection of civilian infrastructure within the global initiative to galvanize political commitment to the international humanitarian law. Our commitment to humanitarian personnel was reaffirmed when we signed 2 months ago the Declaration on their protection in September 2025.
After emphasizing that political solutions are indispensable, Mr. Benjama highlighted global pressure from economic shocks and climate conditions must be exerted, reaffirming Algeria's support for development through the Algerian Cooperation Agency with UNICEF and the UN Development Programme. Algeria's permanent representative emphasized that the Security Council must adopt concrete measures, including an early warning mechanism for violations affecting water and food systems, funding to quickly restore essential services in conflict areas, safe humanitarian access, and accountability for attacks targeting civilian infrastructure. He also called for a dedicated sanctions regime against parties violating Resolution 2417 and international humanitarian law, stressing that when armed conflict causes or worsens food insecurity, the international community and Security Council must act swiftly and decisively, especially when starvation is used as a weapon.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. The Sudanese army has regained control of the town of Sayala in North Kordofan state from the Rapid Support Forces after fierce clashes. In addition, Sudanese army soldiers posted videos on social media showing them entering the town. Since the Rapid Support paramilitary forces captured Al-Fashir, the capital of North Darfur, last month, fighting between the rebel group and the Sudanese army has spread to new fronts, particularly in the Kordofan region, in the center and south of the country. At the humanitarian level, the UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Tom Fletcher described the situation of displaced civilians in North Darfur State, Sudan, as unspeakable, stating that more than half of the survivors who have fled are children.
Had a week inside Darfur, which is now the epicenter of human suffering in the world. It's an absolute horror show. Al-Fashir, based on the testimonies I heard from many survivors, is basically a crime scene. The deliberate attacks on civilians, and I heard so many stories of these, must stop, and we want those who commit these crimes to face justice. There is potentially a moment of opportunity here if the international community is ready to seize it. And we need the Security Council, we need member states to be much, much clearer on protection of civilians, on humanitarian access, on limiting these flows of arms which are doing such damage to civilians, and on ensuring we get accountability and investigations.
Meanwhile, the Sudanese Minister of State for Finance, Mohamed Noor Daim, said that nearly 17 million pupils have been forced to abandon their studies due to the deteriorating security and humanitarian situation in the country, which has been plagued by armed conflict for more than 2 years. Now, South African Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola has stressed that the mysterious arrival in South Africa of around 100 Palestinians last week is part of a clear plan to expel Palestinians from their land. Mohammed Khatel.
The statement came after a group of Palestinians arrived last Thursday at Johannesburg airport on a charter flight from Nairobi. The group, made up of 153 men, women and children, who were detained by police border on their plane for more than 12 hours because their passport lacked exit stamps, were allowed afterwards to set foot on South African soil out of compassion. The South African government is suspicious of the circumstances surrounding the arrival of this plane, said Ronald Lamola, emphasizing that his country no longer wants any flights to its territory. He argued that this was a clear plan to expel Palestinians from Gaza, the West Bank and surrounding areas and relocate them to different parts of the world, something that South Africa strongly opposes. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announced recently that his country intended to investigate the circumstances surrounding the mysterious arrival of these 153 Palestinians.
And with this, we come to the end of our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to our health magazine, compiled and presented by Mohammed Khatil.
Hello and welcome to this new edition of your weekly program, The Health